Okay, hi everybody. I'm going to get my Instagram going and then we can get this Crushing Doubt Q&A going. The delay as always. Here we go. All right, we are live on YouTube and Instagram, and we should be on Facebook as well. Guys, it is great to be here with you. I'm Dr. Dan Ratner. I'm here for Crushing Doubts Q&A. And of course, we are here to talk about mind-body issues or mind-body symptoms. So just as a reminder of what that is, that's anything that's not a purely medical, physical, or structural thing that's leading to physical symptoms. And the bottom line is it's not in your head, it's from your head. So your brain or your mind, typically with feelings or thinking, leads to changes in the body. Now, why do I do this? I do this because I suffered a lot from these things, but especially I suffered from 8 years of chronic everyday back pain. And it was every single moment, and I wasn't getting explanations. And I really I couldn't have imagined that I'd be sitting here with you guys talking about not only being better, but knowing how to help you. That would have been shocking to me at that time. But what ended up happening is I found the right information eventually, but it took 8 years, and that is unacceptable. So I am here to bring you the information as fast as possible, and I'm here to try to get as many people to at least be considering the right information as quickly as possible, so that they can get the answers they need. Now, as it turned out, when I did get the right information, it really changed what I was thinking. I had been raised, as many of us have, to think that anything that is hurting us, any symptom we're having, or an illness that we're having, injury or pain, has to come from something physical. That's a physical experience. Well, the truth is that's actually correct. However, most people, when they think about these things, they think, well, it has to be a physical thing leading to a physical thing. When in reality, there's another way. And not only is there another way, but it's a very frequent occurrence for many, many people, that what's going on in their minds, in their feeling, and in their thinking, and in their relationship with themselves can lead to changes in the body head to toe. So I have a rule of thumb, which is if your body can do it, your mind can use it. And this happens all the time. 99.99999% of almost anything that you feel physically is going to end up being a mind-body experience. Now, I encourage everybody, go to a doctor if you're not sure. And doctors sometimes won't have the answers. They can even steer you wrong. But I'd rather you get steered wrong but have been checked out and then come to me. If you're not sure, go to a doctor. And but what you'll find is a lot of them either won't know what's going on, or they'll give you a diagnosis that's been debunked that I can talk to you about and help talk you through and show that it's mind-body. Or the best doctors are going to understand mind-body symptoms. And there are great, great medical doctors in the mind-body field who help us distinguish what's what. Typically speaking, though, when people come to see me, even though I'm a psychologist for this, for a physical issue, it's because they've seen doctors and they're either not getting results, or they got, clearance, at least to the degree that they said, we don't know what's happening with you. Well, once that happens, we can start to dig in and work on mind-body symptoms. Now, why do I do a Q&A on this? Because what I found is when I found the right information, or initially from Dr. John Sarno's works, he was brilliant, brilliant man who saved my life. But even when I read him, I had questions. And he said that accepting the diagnosis, accepting a mind-body diagnosis, is the key to getting relief from these symptoms. He's 100% right about that. But accepting the diagnosis can be difficult for some people. They need reason to accept it. And not only do they need reason to accept it, but they can often have lots of questions. So I had tons of questions. Everything I've created since that time is to get people the resources that I wished had been there. And this Q&A is one of them. I would have loved there to be a mind-body expert who could tell me exactly how to think about these things, or answer questions about why this, why that, why did this happen, why does it go this way? And that's what I'm here to do. So I will be answering these questions in the form of my mind-body system, which I call the columns system, or columns work, or the 3 columns. And these 3 columns they get their name because I initially would divide a sheet of paper and say, okay, divide it into 3 columns: emotions, doubt, and power. The emotions are about your feelings. No surprise there. Doubt is about what happens with your thinking when it goes awry. And if you have the same thinking again and again, everything stays the same. And finally, the power column is about your relationship with yourself. Now, I'll explain more as we go, but I really want to get to the questions right away. All right. I see lots of people here, which is really great to see. Exciting to see a bunch of names here. Please say hello if you would like to, and not only ask your questions, but I want you guys to share your thoughts. I would love it if you would share some wins. This is a great thing that can really encourage people in their recovery to find out there are wins, big and small, that make a big difference. Sometimes those wins are with symptoms. Sometimes those wins are with the right kind of thinking. So anything you want to voice, I'm here. Let's dive in with a couple questions. Kasim, good to see you here. Kasim says, I'm going to Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving get together on Sunday with the family. Thanksgiving is different in Canada earlier. And you know from my past that these gatherings often trigger me in many ways, period. Just wondering if you can suggest something. I think you were saying. So there's many things that I could say. I do want to say this. This is a great example of why I run groups. So in my groups, it gives you a chance to do exactly what we're doing here, but there's a lot of give and take. If I were talking to a Kasim in a group, I'd say, okay, what's the main problem here? And Kasim, when I say this, I totally get what the problem is, but there are specifics in it that I could get even further with. Like, well, what are you afraid of? What's the worst part? What are you wanting to get out of it? What do you wish you didn't have to deal with? All of these questions are questions that can give us better answers. However, I'm going to go ahead and dive in with what my answer is here as best I can, and then do follow-up. This is something I want to encourage you all, though. Everything we talk about here is the beginning of a conversation. I don't expect one answer to get you all the answers you need. What I expect it to do is to lead you to the next question, or to maybe to resolve something, hopefully to resolve something. But just more and more, we want to get you to certainty. We'll talk more about that. Now, we know these are triggering. Kasim, the first thing I want to say is you have just taken a big step forward. I got an email from you, which I haven't responded to yet, but this was a great, great email. I won't divulge what's in it because it's a private email, but I will say the basic information, which is you're talking about the fact that you've had trauma activations. Now, a trauma activation is what happens when an event from the outside that's very upsetting gets you into a totally different mindset. It brings back all the traumas of the past, and it can get you thinking some pretty warped thinking. Now, from a columns perspective, trauma activation is what I call mega doubt. It's like the biggest form of doubt, the most warped thinking. And that's what doubt is. It's warped thinking. We all have it, but it gets us thinking down the wrong paths. That can be about symptoms. And that's what the doubt column is for, to recognize seemingly chronic symptoms because our thinking has gone astray and is staying there. But in a trauma activation, that's happening at a huge level and usually related to interpersonal things, related to our relationship with ourselves, related to deep emotional experience. And you can recognize a trauma activation in a number of different ways. A lot of times people will have suicidal ideation during that time. That's what suicidal ideation is, as I see it, is a trauma activation. But you might have foggy thinking. You might have a very quick, like hair trigger temper going on during that time. You might find that you just don't feel good, or maybe you've lost your appetite. Maybe you're not remembering things as well. Your whole brain goes into a different state when you're having a trauma activation. So the reason I'm bringing this up for you, Kasim, and for everybody who's listening, is because when you go and you get triggered, you could get knocked into this. In your email, you noted a good breakthrough against a trauma activation where you were able to get through it with it only lasting a couple hours. That's good for a trauma activation. Now, I want you to be encouraged, though. You're not inherently automatically going to enter a trauma activation where it's so much worse, but you do need to be watching out for it. So if something happens, we want to follow the column system. So here's what you do with the columns. The first line of defense is bring down doubt. Don't buy into the faulty thinking. And I'm not saying that's easy, but that's something we need to work towards doing. So bring down the doubt. Then the flow goes, learn about the emotions. So if you've brought down the doubt enough, even just to say, I think this is a trauma activation, I'm not going to buy into this as much as I can, Then you can start thinking about the emotions. See if you can locate what's happening here that you don't like. And in a way, that's this. Well, these are all forms of self-alignment. First, you're aligning with yourself around, I'm not buying into that doubt. It's scary. It's bad. I'm not going to do that. Then you're aligning with yourself around, what's my emotional experience? What matters to me here? What bothers me here? And then ultimately it will flow into power. So the flow of the columns is bring down doubt, learn about emotions, flow into power. And once you've recognized the emotional situation, you make as powerful a choice as you can. I'm not going to answer that question. I'm not going to be part of that conversation. I'm going to go have a conversation with somebody else. I might leave early. I might change the conversation. So many different ways. So the primary thing, Kasim, is follow the columns in their system. Bring down the doubt. Don't buy into it. Figure out what's going on with you emotionally after that. Pinpoint what it is. Recognize the trauma activation is an emotions column symptom. Because I didn't say this at the outset for some reason this time, but I'll say it. In the emotions column, symptoms are about onsets and upticks. The doubt column is about the seemingly chronic ones that last. And the power column is about plateau level symptoms that are just kind of hanging around, signaling to you that there's something out of alignment with yourself. Kasim, you need to look out for the trauma activation as an emotions column onset or uptick. If it's happening, it's a symptom. But go in, bring down the doubt, learn about the emotions, and then choose the most powerful path. Here's the thing, guys. When it comes to power, you have to remember, don't abandon yourself. You need you. You need to have a good functional relationship with you as best you can at any given time. Even during a really bad interaction, you can say to yourself, okay, this interaction sucks, but I'm not going to be in it forever. And I don't live with this person. I live with me. So I'll tell you what, this is a very long-winded answer, but I'll give you my main answer, Kasim, is don't forget. The main thing that matters here is your relationship with you. All right, let's go with that, but let's do follow-up as needed. All right. Tons of people to say hi to. Thank you for joining us here, everybody. I see lots of names. Happy to give shout-outs if there's time. Speaking of which, Rita says, hi, Dan and Crushing Doubt Troop. Really good to see you, Rita. She is a great mind-body coach in the field who trained in my system, which if you're interested in doing, you can email me, dan@crushingdoubt.com. Okay. Shelby Geyer says, I feel like I need another doctor exam. More like MRI, but no. Why the high highs and low lows? When I'm high, my thoughts are great. So Shelby, this is the primary project we're working on with you, is establishing two things. One is that your symptoms always relate to your mindset. Always. You know, Shelby, as far as I'm concerned, you have been cleared so many times that there's absolutely no reason for a doctor exam. I can guarantee you there's nothing wrong with you medically in any way. What you do have is mind-body symptoms that go up and down related to fears. And I would say when you're at the high highs, one of two things is happening. Either you are not experiencing the fear or the confusion or the negative, really negative doubts. So you just feel free and light. That's one possibility. The other possibility of how you can get to high highs is to recognize I'm feeling better, but it's because my mind is better. And that's an even better way of understanding the high highs, because that's what's happening. You are recognizing that this is tied to your mental life and that you're feeling better. And the low lows, they happen because your mindset's not in a good place, but even worse, you lose track of the fact that that's all that's happening. And when I say that's all that's happening, I'm not saying that unempathically. It's still a horrible experience, but the good news is you're not in danger. You're just in a low state with yourself. You're in a negative rut with your interaction. Now, that's one thing we want to establish is lockstep, your symptoms fit with your mindset. That's one. The second thing we need to establish is you can control your mind. And that's the biggest one for Shelby. It's the biggest one for a lot of people. The idea that you can get control of your mind, a lot of people they have doubts about that. So let's look at what doubts are. My channel's called Crushing Doubt. My brand's called Crushing Doubt. And yet I talk about 3 columns. Well, the 3 columns are all important, but they are a system that is essentially designed to explain what is happening so that you don't have doubt. So the overarching picture, I have this saying, you make sense and your symptoms make sense. We got to make sense of things. Doubt is when things don't make sense. And there are 4 forms of doubt, but they all don't make total sense as you're thinking about them. One is fear. If you're having a lot of fear, not only are things not going to make sense, you may not even be able to think straight. Confusion is another form of doubt. It's not as bad as fear. You're not in a total panic, but you still have no idea what's going on. I call fear and confusion the negative side of doubt. The reason they're called the negative side of doubt is not a criticism, but it's more just noting that you can't work with that doubt very well. You've got to obliterate it. You've got to get more certain. Then you can move into the positive side of doubt. The positive side of doubt is workable. It's useful. And that is lack of certainty and unanswered questions. So again, the 4 forms of doubt: fear, confusion, lack of certainty, and unanswered questions. Lack of certainty means I'm not that confused, but I'm just not certain. I need to look at it more. That's in a more proactive state of looking at things. Unanswered questions, even better. It's the questions that you say to yourself, if I could know this, I would feel a lot better. So that's the nature of doubt, but you can have doubts about all kinds of things. You can have doubt about whether you have a mind-body symptom or not. You can have doubt as to whether that mind-body symptom is harder to conquer, and you can have doubt as to whether there's something about you that can get in the way of the healing, including, can I master my own mind? Shelby, that is the apex of the problem for you, is that the highs and lows, what you're describing is, I cannot control my own mind. And I would say, yet. I've got to get you convinced that you can. Now, Shelby did have some follow-up. She said, high highs are from lower symptoms, which equals a better mindset. Okay. I know that that's true, but actually, in a way, it's backwards, because what it's saying is, I don't have control over this. I am a yo-yo following my symptoms. That's how you think about yourself. And that's not actually true. What's actually true is you got a better mindset, which then brought the symptoms down, and then you got into a better state. You're skipping a step in understanding it. And I don't mean that critically. Okay. Now, Shelby then said, and how the better mindset? We know mantras don't work if we don't believe them. That's true. This is where I'm stuck. What we need to do, Shelby, is look at the concept of whether you believe that you can get control of your own mind. And if you don't believe that, we need to know why. Now, I've said this before, even today. The flow of the columns is bring down doubt, learn about emotions, flow into power. You guys are going to have a lot of questions about what I'm saying, and I get that. But I'm going to lay it out, and then I want you to ask your questions, and I'll answer them. Doubt comes first because we can't see anything clearly if doubt is in the picture. If doubt is covering over things, we just can't see it. And what do we do to get rid of the doubt? There are 3 steps in the doubt column. Observe, articulate, and counter. To observe is simply to call it into question, whatever the thought is. If you're not calling it into question, then it passes itself off as a truth, and you're just in it. And that can lead to a lot of fear and confusion. But if you've called it into question, you're seeing it, now I'm looking at it. Now you can articulate it, put it into words. So Shelby, you're not yet observing this. You still think it's true. You're also not yet fully articulating it. None of this is critical. I'm giving you steps. Put it into words. Why do you think you can't control your mind, but I can control mine? There's actually no inherent difference between me and you. The main difference between me and you is I believe I can control my mind and you don't. But we need to figure out why. Why? And you got to ask that question. Now, countering is the last one, where you actually go in and counter that doubt or that belief with some different information. I wouldn't even bother with that yet until you've observed and articulated what these doubts are. We need to find that, because what you're saying right here is, no, it's all about what the symptoms are doing. Well, then what you're saying is you have no control over this. When you actually do, I'm going to need to show you that. Okay. Now, for people like Shelby, or really anybody else who needs help on the work, you can join me. I can see you 3 days a week in my groups. I can provide lots and lots of help. And the reason I created the groups is that before I had written my book, before I had gotten it fully written, I was writing it. I had these seminars, which I still have. They're very, very useful information. My book and the seminars are the two ways you can quickly find out all the information that you need. Those are available on Amazon for the book, on my website, www.crushingdoubt.com for the seminars. But also on the website is a place where you can join my groups. This is just $100 a month to see me 3 times a week for meetings that last 2 hours or more. You're getting over 24 hours of interaction with me, where not only am I interacting with you, but you're seeing me interact with other people. And it's much more effective even than this Q&A, which I think this Q&A is wonderful. But we get so much further in a short amount of time because I can gather information. You can ask me questions. I can ask you questions. And we get places with this. Sometimes we're working on bringing down doubt. Sometimes we're working on the emotions column. Let me make a point about what that is. The emotions column is a way that we can get at our emotional life faster. Instead of it taking years of therapy, we can run through things very quickly and see what are the things that bother you. What is the symptom? When did the symptom pop up? Which emotional theme related to that moment? And boom, you can get access to it much faster. So I've talked a little bit about what I do in the doubt column and what I do in the emotions column. In the power column, there's ways to recognize how to align with yourself. We deal with the past and get it settled. We deal with the present and see what you're grappling with. And we deal with the future and how you're feeling about that. What I just talked with Shelby about in some ways was a power column intervention where I was saying to her, there's hope for the future. But mostly it was a doubt column intervention because I was saying, you're not believing you can get control of your mind. And we can. Okay, that's a little taste of what we would do in group work. And keep the questions coming and come to group. I can help you right then and there. Okay, and just so you guys know, they're Monday, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays. Monday from 1 to 3 p.m. Eastern, Tuesday from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern, and Wednesday from 5 to 7 p.m. Eastern. I tried to give them at different times so that people across the world could get very affordable help at the times they needed it. Okay, Jamie, good to see you here. Sharing a win. Beautiful. Love it. I feel that although I am doing it afraid, although I feel that although I'm doing it afraid, symptom upticks are not lasting like before, going down in hours, which never happens. I'm doing the columns work. Dan is answering my questions. I'm not fighting the symptom as much. I'm practicing allowing. So your fear about the symptom is going way down. This is the strongest form of doubt is fear. Your symptoms will get less if fear comes down. Beautiful. I'm practicing allowing. I would love the symptom to diminish or that I can see it occasionally, not constant. That'll keep happening as you make progress. I think there is a doubt of can it fully get it to go away? Can you speak to that, Dan, please? Thank you for your continued support. Okay, well, thank you for sharing the win, Jamie. Very exciting. And Jamie did have a breakthrough. You've had a number of breakthroughs, but one of the breakthroughs this week is that you got your emotions column actually working. You had a symptom onset or uptick. You recognized what the emotion was, and the symptom actually came down. I'm telling you, these columns actually work, which is why they help. If they're not helping yet, there's just something standing in the way, and I can interpret what that is, which is a big part of what I do in groups. So let's talk to you, Jamie, about this idea of whether you can get it to fully go away. So listen, the only thing you really need to get it to fully go away is to have no doubt. Now, I'm not saying that's easy to do, but just note, if that's the goal, we need to think about how can we get you there? Well, one way we can get you there, Jamie, is by the wins along the way. If you already got more progress than you thought you could, why on earth would you not be able to get more? And all we have to do is work these columns. So I set up the column system for a reason. All of this information and the way that I think about it all came from things that actually worked with me. And then as I tried it out with other people, I found that it actually worked with them. So what I would do with that question, can I get fully better? Don't bite off that much to chew. Just instead say, wait a minute. If I get better and better, then I'm going to get fully better. It's kind of like running a marathon. You don't run a marathon saying, how am I ever going to get to the finish line? You say, I'm going to keep doing the next step. I'm going to keep running. Let me see if I can get through this mile. Okay, I did. That's why you train for a marathon. You train for a marathon not just physically. You train for it mentally. You need to know you can do it. You need to get to a place where you believe you can do it. So, Jamie, you can get to a place of believing you can do it by relying on the fact that you've already made major gains that you did not think you could. The other way you can do it is relying on not only me, but the columns themselves. These things really work. So all you guys need to do, I don't mean to make it sound like it's easy, but it is simple. All you need to do is ask questions about the columns, how they work and why they work. If you get those answers, you're on your way. Okay, Jamie, let me know if that helped you enough. Anything more you need to say, please do let me know. If I missed any questions, by the way, please just bump them up in the list. I'm happy to answer the questions. I don't want to miss anybody. Okay? Luann Davison, good to see you here. Dr. Dan, I know I've said this before, but when you get clear, and I'm halfway, it looks like that question may have gotten cut off. I think you meant like medically clear, Luann, but let me read the rest. And I'm halfway through your amazing book. Glad to hear that. And I want to know, does the column system process emotions? Because I'm a little bit confused on that. Okay, let's start with that. And then if you need to go back to when you get clear. The system absolutely is for processing emotions. There's 3 columns and they each do a certain thing. The emotions column is all about processing emotions. It is about a shortcut, actually, a very, very effective shortcut. It's not even a shortcut. It's just the most direct route of recognizing the things that bother you, how it fits with the moment, what your symptoms are saying about that. And essentially what happens is your body becomes a guidepost to tell you about your emotional life. And the columns are the interpreter. So chapter 4 is where I talk about the emotions column. And that is a place where you get the emotional awareness that you need. Now, you may be saying about processing emotions, you may be saying, is this also about figuring out what to do about that emotional life? Well, I often say the emotions column and power column are both emotional columns. The emotions column is where we get access to things. It's where we become more aware. The power column is where we make adjustments. So if you're talking about processing, you might be talking about the power column. That you're going to get to in chapter 6. That's where we begin to say, well, what do we do with all this emotional knowledge? All right, Luann, let's follow up from there. That's my answer so far, but we'll go from there. Okay. All right. Oh, back over to YouTube. Russell Crane's music. Good to see you, Russell. Hey, Dan, are overuse injuries just TMS? TMS is tension myositis syndrome, which is what Dr. Sarno called mind-body symptoms. There's all kinds of equivalents for that. Neuroplastic symptoms are another one. I am a board member of the ATNS, the Association for the Treatment of Neuroplastic Symptoms. And these are all interchangeable terms. I did just come back from a fantastic conference, the ATNS conference. I encourage you guys, don't miss it next year. It's just the best conference ever. We'll talk more about it. But back to you, Russell. Lately, I've been doing higher frequency training, doing a relatively low volume of pull-ups, but often 4 times a week. When I finished my set today, I noticed pain and tightness in my back that hasn't left. Can I apply the rule if it's not a blunt force trauma to this situation and totally write it off as TMS? Thanks. Absolutely. This is a mind-body symptom, 100%. The only time we get injuries are when there's a really violent experience. If we fall with force, if we run into a brick wall. But movement injuries, for example, they don't actually happen. I mean, they happen in that people have that experience, but what's really happening is there's a complicated mind-body experience, usually related to emotion, sometimes related to our doubt. And when you move, boom, there it is. And it's incredibly convincing. And it's also actually physical. But the reality is you are not injuring yourself. So, yes, you can write this off as mind-body. Any kind of, let me see what you just said, overuse injuries. Overuse doesn't make any sense. In fact, it doesn't even make sense with what people claim. They say, oh, you could overuse things, but if you If you don't use them too much, they atrophy. Well, where's this weird magical balance that people are saying we need to get to? Here's the reality. If overuse led to injuries, we'd have injuries all the time, even more than we actually do now. That's one thing. Another thing is, if overuse led to injuries, it doesn't make sense with the idea that using things strengthens them. This is what drives me crazy about structuralist arguments. They argue both sides of an argument, they don't fit together, and they don't even bother to resolve that. I mean, think about it. When you use your muscles again and again, they're supposed to get stronger. And then they say, but also, if you overuse them, they'll get weaker or they'll get hurt. Which is it, guys? And I'm saying that in support of all you doubters out there. So we do not need to worry about overuse. What's happening for you, Russell, is there probably is an emotions column experience that's leading to the onset and uptick at that time. And it is connecting to the triggering experience of that exercise to try to convince you you're injured. You're not injured. This is a mind-body experience. Now, I said this to Russell, but I'll say this to you all. It doesn't matter what I think. It matters what you think. Why is that? Because it's your mind that causes what happens in your body. So I can give you good information, but I got to see what you have to see what you can do with that information. That's what's going to get you relief from the symptoms. Okay? All right. Back to Kasim. For some reason, YouTube didn't take the second part, but I said how to stay calm when I'm just getting over the trauma activations, and I don't want to set a boundary that may come across as aggressive. You answered my question, even though it was only half of it. Okay, well, I'm glad I did a good enough job to do that. But just jumping back briefly to touch base on that. One of the things, Kasim, is stay connected to you. It fits with what I said. And you can tell people, guys, I'm in the middle of an activation. I'm not thinking as straight as I want. You need to give me some time. I'll get back to you. Be good to yourself. That's the key. Kasim, let's follow up as needed, okay? Susan, I do see you had a question. I'm going to get to that in a second, but I'm going to jump back to Instagram. Sarah Rudo, good to see you here. Been offered another surgery for a bilateral groin repair. One side feels great. The other has been a struggle in many ways. 2 surgeons want to remove the nerves and internal stitches. Scared. Scared to do another after how hard this side has been. But this also affects many parts of my life, both daily and my career and passions. Unsure what to do. Could give more time, but this has been quite a difficult 4 months, and I've overcome CRPS, that's complex regional pain syndrome, which is a mind-body symptom affecting limbs, thoracic outlet, another mind-body symptom, dizziness, floaters, etc. Unfortunately, this to me feels pretty structural, and I'm being told there are reasons, including the tissue itself. Okay. Man, I will say this. Every time I hear about a situation like this, I wish I could sit down with each of you for like 2 hours and just hash this out. Figure out what's going on for you. Figure out what you've been told. Figure out the data, the information, the clues. But I will say this, Sarah. I'm going to go with what I know right now, and we'll do follow-up from this. You've had many, many mind-body symptoms. I don't mean that critically. I mean it empathically. I'm the same way. I'm a symptomatic person a lot of the time. And the symptoms are always expressing things to me. So I have some questions for you that I'd want to ask. Why are the doctors saying you could do this surgery? Are they saying that you should do this surgery? If they are saying you should do the surgery, why? What are they thinking that this is going to repair? I will say, though, I have some doubts in my own mind. I mean, the positive side of doubts, where I'm skeptical of what these doctors are saying, because you've had mind-body experience in so many different ways. Why would this be any different? So I have, I hope you guys know about this, but I write about it in my book. There's a philosophical proposition called Occam's razor. By the way, Sarah made it. Thank you for the tip. She gave a tip, which is really helpful because we're often running at a bit of a deficit in the work that we do in the mind-body field, and every little bit helps. So thank you for chipping that in. If I can help in any way with any questions, please do let me know. Back to the other Sarah. You've had mind-body issues throughout. Why would this be different? So Occam's razor was what I was talking about. Occam's razor is the philosophical proposition that the simplest explanation is usually the right one. Another way of saying it is, the more assumptions you have to make that something's true, the less likely it is to be true. So My assumption would be you've had all these mind-body symptoms. Why wouldn't this just be another? But the question is, how do we get you to believe that? And I'm totally open to hearing what you have to say. I don't want to push past what you're saying. You're saying this feels pretty structural. I'd want to know more about that because a lot of times doubt hides in that kind of experience. It feels structural, so it must be, right? So we need to look at these things. But I want to call it into question because I am of the opinion that very little requires surgery. And when surgery is required, doctors are very, very clear about it. Things like a completely torn tendon. I had a friend who had a complete tear of a tendon in his arm. And what ended up happening is his muscle was starting to atrophy because it was not attached to the blood supply. Now, that's an extreme situation. He did need that surgery. Other people can have surgeries because the bone has completely disintegrated in the socket, so it's not allowing for mobility. That's another reason for surgery. Now, listen, I'm not a medical doctor. I rely on the medical doctors in the field, but these are the kind of reasons that make me think, okay, yeah, that sounds like a surgery is necessary. Whereas for others, they're offering it, but they don't have a clear opinion of why. And meanwhile, you've got a lot of mind-body symptoms. So I would say this is a great example of why Sarah, I'd love you to come to group and have us just crank this out. Or you can find a time to meet with me separately. I do individual consultations, though they are on the expensive side because the demand is so high, as well as the results are so good. But the group is meant to be affordable for anybody to come to ask me questions on a more regular basis. Sometimes in the short term, if they need something to figure something out like this, sometimes for longer periods of time to really crank out what are the columns, how do I work with them. But Sarah, I'm skeptical that you would need a surgery given what's going on. And at the same time, I acknowledge you know more than I do. I'm not telling you you know less than I do, or you should just trust me, right? Sorry, I clicked on something accidentally. So let's think this through. But I just want to take it with a grain of salt that this is being offered to you because you've had a lot of mind-body symptoms in the past. Okay, let's see what you think about that. We'll go from there. Okay, Sarah made it, so I'm going to bump yours up because I appreciate the tip. Sarah said, it's hard for me to believe my tinnitus is mind-body. Tinnitus is ringing in the ears. I've been to the ENT, and they say there's nothing wrong, but I've worked on allowing emotions and processing trauma, but it's still here. I'm starting to have days where it's so quiet I barely hear it, but the next day it goes back up. All right, so I'm going to give you my take on this, Sarah, but it's just my take. Again, it only matters what you think, but let me lend you this thinking. First of all, tinnitus is a very common mind-body symptom in general. In my experience, people actually only have it for mind-body reasons. I don't think I've ever heard of anybody where I've listened to the facts and thought, no, that one's not mind-body. Even if they had like a head injury, it still ends up being mind-body. So the fact that it's very commonly a mind-body symptom already has my ears pricking up and thinking, yes, this is mind-body in my mind, but it doesn't matter what I think. Now, what I would want to ask you, let's say we were working in group, I'd want to ask you why. Why is it hard for you to believe? And I'm not asking that because I think it doesn't make sense that you have skepticism. Skepticism makes sense. That's fine, but I'd want you to voice it. What's making you think it's hard to believe that the tinnitus would be mind-body? Here we have some other evidence. It's gotten to a point where it's barely there sometimes. And then the next day it goes up. So it's not behaving. I see, Susan. I didn't skip your question. I just had to get Sarah in because she bumped it up with that tip. I'll get to you in a sec. So the fact that it goes up and down, that's behaving like a mind-body symptom. It's one of the ways that we can really get to recognizing mind-body symptoms is just to see there's ups and downs. There's inconsistencies. These are evidence of mind-body. Now, I'll tell you what's the strongest evidence of mind-body. Oh, don't be sorry, Susan. I get you. You just wanted to make sure you've been seen, and I got you. But this is one of the ways that we can see mind-body symptoms is that they don't operate like a structural issue. A broken bone does not come and go. The flu doesn't come and go. I mean, it goes eventually, but it doesn't come and go in a brief period of time. So there's lots of evidence that I could suggest that shows you this, but I'll tell you the best evidence of all, Sarah, is if I got to work with you and we got to talk about it and I got to show you how it's correlating these symptoms with ups and downs in your emotional life or in your doubt whatever you're thinking, that would show you make sense and your symptoms make sense. These symptoms don't go up and down for no reasons. All right, let's follow up on that, Sarah, as needed. I want to hear what you think about it. Okay. Shelby said, I think we would all like 2 hours with you. Haha. I wish I could give more to that. I wish I could sit down with each one of you and just crank it out for like 2 weeks straight, just with one person. That would be great. All right. Let's get back to you, Susan. Thank you for your patience. Okay, Dan, one of my many symptoms is blurry vision and feeling like my eyes aren't working together. Weird feelings. Doctor said everything is fine. TMS and what metaphor? So, yes, it is TMS or mind body for sure. Eye symptoms are another very common mind body symptom. Blurry eyes, floaters in the eyes, dry eyes. Anything the body can do, the mind can use. Anything. Tooth pain, stomach issues, pain in your joints, foggy brain, hearing problems, being sensitive to hearing. You name it. If the body can do it, the mind can use it. So doctor says you're fine, and this is a very common mind-body symptom, slam dunk. Now, the reason Susan asks what's the metaphor is that emotions column symptoms, especially the onsets and upticks. Onset, just to be clear, onset is right when the symptom starts. Upticks are you were having the symptom already, but then it goes up. Those tend to be very metaphorical. Doubt symptoms are not very metaphorical. They tend to respond to whatever your experience is. If you were just moving your arm really fast, you might be more likely to develop a shoulder symptom, like let's say you're shoveling snow or something, because of the belief system. But in emotions column symptoms, there's no belief happening, there's no event happening, and then suddenly something comes on. Well, that would be metaphorical. And a good metaphor that could happen for blurry vision is you're not seeing things clearly, literally. And why is that happening now, Susan? Well, Susan is a great example of the flow of the columns. Bring down doubt, learn about emotions, flow into power. Susan and I did a lot of work bringing down doubt. It's not all gone. It can be there at times. Even in here, there's an unanswered question. That's a form of doubt, but it is the gold standard of doubt. It's a good way to work with doubt. And once doubt is down, you can start to see things emotionally. Susan, you're just starting to see things and your vision just got blurry. That's not an accident. Remember, mind-body symptoms are a psychological defense. So you're trying not to see things at some level. That's what it's for. And that's what's happening. This is not bad news, by the way. It's just a stop along the way. All right? So let me know if that answered your question, Susan. Okay. Jill Rado, good to see you here. I have PPD, which is psychophysiologic. PPPD. Maybe I'm wrong with what PPPD is. Okay. A vestibular disorder. Okay, that's something else. Sorry. And it affects my balance. How do I change my mindset and stop the fear when I'm feeling dizzy and spacey? Okay, so first of all, I wanted to say almost all dizziness that is lasting in any way, especially if it's not connected to some kind of clear medical issue, is mind-body. So I think you're already onto that, Jill, but I just want to say that to be reassuring. This is mind-body. Now you're asking a fantastic question, which is already down the path of mind-body work. How do I change my mindset and stop the fear when I'm feeling dizzy and spacey? The first thing I want to tell you is to bring down fear, you actually have to recognize, let me say this actually, this is for Jill, but it's for everybody. I'm going to offer potential solutions. They may or may not work that first time around. If they don't work, you'll tell me why not until we zero in on one that does. But here's one that I would try for somebody that I'm just meeting and talking about balance and dizziness and vestibular issues. I would say the first thing we need to do is to get you to not be afraid of the fear, to recognize that fear is driving everything and that you actually can bring down fear. It's reminding me of what I was saying to Shelby. We can get things under control, but I have to get you to believe that first. So that's one. Another way that you could work at this is to recognize, just like what I said to Susan, that there's metaphors in symptom onsets. When you're feeling dizzy or you can't stand up straight, think about the emotional experience that's leading to this. So you can either process emotions or go directly at the fear and bring it down. Ultimately, we're going to need to talk about what you're experiencing And C, how can you have better self-talk? That's what changing mindset is about a lot of the time, because often what people do is they tell themselves scary stories. Oh my God, this began. What if this doesn't stop? What if is some of doubt's favorite words. What if? That's what happened with my back pain. What if this is a back problem? Boom, there it was. Doubt loves those words. So changing your mindset would be to say, instead of what if and all the scary stories, you could say to yourself, this is fear, and fear won't kill me, and fear won't dominate these symptoms, because if I bring down my fear, the symptoms will go down. And Jill, what I'm saying is actually true. It doesn't matter what I think. It matters what you think. So I want to work with you to bring down your fear, to get a sense of how you can talk to yourself in a better way. That's going to change the mindset. But it's all about understanding. It's all educational. So I'm giving you ways to think about it, that you're having fear of fear, which is a whole other thing. Sometimes people don't even catch that. You need to know what's happening to know how it's going to get better. So how can you change your mindset? Bottom line is, let's find out what's happening in your mind. And the columns organize that. And then they help you figure out what to do because of that organization and understanding. Okay, now I hope that's helpful, but ask the follow-up questions. Keep them coming, okay? All right. Patty Flowers asks, is allodynia a mind-body symptom? Okay, so it's amazing how many medical terms get thrown around, and it can be very confusing for people. So when things come up like this, I like to answer it not just for you, but for everybody. So as I understand it, allodynia is like basically very sensitive to touch and temperature and things like that. Often pain, usually related to the skin. Yes, it is a mind-body symptom, 100%. Now, can people have sensitive skin for other reasons? Yeah, they could, because of maybe a rash, or if you've got the flu, some kind of inflammatory process can lead to sensitivity. But those are all very transient. And you know, sometimes people get worried about the word inflammatory, but I'm talking about very short-term stuff. That's all inflammation really is. No inflammation should be lasting, and anything that is because you have doubt, you're afraid, you're in a mind-body process. But allodynia, especially beyond the short term, is always a mind-body symptom. Patty, let me know if I answered your question to your satisfaction. Okay, Jody Lynn, good to see you here. What if you have doubt about other things that don't have to do with symptoms, such as doubt in your ability to perform well on a task? Love that question, Jody. Doubt exists in 3 different levels, as I put it. One is it a mind-body symptom or not? That's level 1 doubt. Level 2 doubt is this mind-body symptom harder to conquer than others? But level 3 doubt is there something wrong with me? And that's where things like what Jody's talking about fit in. You can have doubt that have nothing to do with symptoms, and guess what? The system still works. We work with it in the exact same way. We observe, we articulate, and we counter. So if you're feeling that you can't perform well on a task, the first thing we would do is observe, call it into question. Is that actually true? Then we would articulate it. Why do you feel that you can't perform well on this task? And then we would find a counter that shows you, no, that's not true. We can actually change that. So Jody, yes, you can address doubt about things other than symptoms. In fact, that's what the power column is ultimately for. It is to get to a good place with yourself, including doubts about the self. All right? Let's follow up from there as needed. All right, Healing with Haley says, is all sciatica mind-body for the most part? Developed this the last week. Yes. Almost all sciatica is going to be related to mind-body. I actually, in my experience, it's all mind-body. There may be medical doctors who would tell you that there's other reasons for sciatica, something pressing on a nerve in some way. But here's the thing, and Dr. Sarno said this. I love having him, the wind at my sails with what Sarno knows. He said that if a nerve's getting pressed, what's going to happen? It's going to go numb. It's not going to keep having pain. So I think all sciatica is mind-body, but I'm willing to hear from medical doctors if there's some reason they think is different. But I really would encourage them to keep in mind, a lot of them are disavowing just how important mind-body experience is, how deep it runs. And so I would say sciatica is so so mind body so much of the time, I wouldn't even think otherwise. And if you developed it this last week, I'd be looking at an emotions column onset. Why then? Think about the timing. That's something we do in the emotions column. That's part of how it works to get those emotions processed. Luann Davison has a follow-up. It just bothers me when my when my body practitioners say you need to get it clear, because what does the boulder back pain study say? Those people had so-called issues and they were not clear, but they still healed. Okay, Luann, I actually probably need to hear more from you about how you're interpreting the boulder back pain study and what it says. But the primary issue that I see in this is that there's a ton of so-called issues, but they've actually been debunked in the medical journals that are in this very field of their medicine. So what does it mean to be clear? It could mean a couple of things. One, they didn't find anything. So there's nothing there. That's one way of getting clear. Here's another way of getting clear. They did find something, but the diagnosis has been debunked. In that case, what are we even arguing about? Because they didn't really find anything meaningful. And that includes things like herniated discs or arthritis as the cause of these things. Those have been debunked. That's another way to get clear. Here's another way to get clear. You've been to see 10 doctors and there's no clear picture. Unclear is clear. A way of putting that is, if they're not clear about it after all that look at you, doctors are actually really good at finding things. Sometimes they find things that aren't even there, like herniated disc cause back pain. But when the picture is unclear, that means you're in the clear. You know, you have to be clearly diagnosed with something that is definitely medical, definitely structural, and definitely purely physical that hasn't been debunked. So most of the time, you're going to end up in the clear. Luann, I hope that helps, but let me know. All right. Among the Wolves says, bumping my question from above. Sorry if I missed that. Your question was missed. Let's go back and find it. Oh, I'm sorry. I did miss that. Thank you for bumping it. Okay. Hi, Dan. I've noticed my skin flares up in settings where I've previously had anxiety attacks, local cafes, etc. Even though I've seen this connection, I'm struggling to change the symptom from flaring. Okay. So here's how I would think about that from a columns perspective. It's an emotions column flare, and you know that. You're seeing the connection, and that's good. But there is doubt here. There's doubt that that recognition can make the change. So we would need to find out what's the doubt that's holding you back. Here's a way of thinking about it. When there's an emotions column event and you would have a flare-up of a symptom, if you didn't have any doubt and you had the emotional awareness, you'd be able to nail that symptom and get it to go down right away. If that doesn't happen, one of two things is happening. Either you are not connecting to the right emotion entirely yet. Could be that you're in the right ballpark, but don't have the specific understanding. Or it could be that there's a doubt covering it over. I would want to look at those two things, and that's how we'll solve this. Because as soon as doubt is low and you've got the exact right emotion, it's going to go away. Okay? Now, we need to look at this. We need to take a look at how this is playing out. Be your own scientist, study this, and see if you can figure out what's the doubt and what is the potential emotion underneath that you might be missing. Okay, now that's my first answer to your question, but follow up here and come to talk to me in group if need be. Let's work at this, all right? Shelby Geyer says, I saw many people that went to the conference posting a picture of a slide saying how many cases of tinnitus is mind-body, and it said 100%. That's what I think, and it's not only what I think about tinnitus, it's what I think about most symptoms. I rely on doctors to catch life and death stuff or things that could alter your life for the rest of your life if you don't treat it. Other than that, the doctors need to come to our side and start our side, just meaning the mind-body side, and think about what's happening from a mind-body perspective. Tinnitus, 100%. Almost every symptom is 100% mind-body. Okay. It comes and goes, always gets me. Mine never goes, but lower. That's still coming and going. Okay? If it goes up and down, that's the same thing. The only thing that's stopping you from getting it to go altogether, Shelby, is your doubt is still too high. All right? Sarah says, I think I'm just scared. Thank you for your response. Fear causes a lot of symptoms. And what I do because I occasionally will get tinnitus, and what I do when tinnitus comes in is I instantly think, just don't be afraid of it and it won't last. And because I know this and because I'm so well versed in this, it doesn't. For some people, that doesn't go that route because they're too scared, or maybe they don't have the full mind body education, or maybe there's an emotion happening right there that's leading to that onset and uptick. So, Sarah, here's what I want you to do. When you have tinnitus come on, I want you thinking, what did I not want to hear? This is metaphorical. What did I not want to hear? And sometimes we don't want to hear things that came from ourselves. But even so, think emotionally first, and that can help you. Secondarily, if you need to, recognize this is just fear. As long as I don't get afraid of this, it's just going to go away. And that's actually true. Keep coming to me with questions. I'm happy to answer them. Camille, great to see you here. Camille is a filmmaker who has done great things in the mind-body community. If you've ever seen on the ATNS website the video of all of us from the conference last year, she made it. So Camille, great to see you here. Let me know if you have any questions. I'm here, and it was great seeing you at the conference again. Okay, Sarah added, Susan, I used to have blurry vision and it went away. It was definitely mind-body for me. I love to remember everything just goes away unless we get a lot of doubt. That's the only reason that symptoms really stay. Even if you have an emotional symptom that's a huge flare-up, emotions don't last. The only thing that makes it last is doubt. Okay, let's keep working on it. All right, let me make sure I didn't miss other questions. If I did, please bump it up, okay? Soaring High says, I put tremendous pressure on my exercise to use exercise, I think on myself, to use exercise to stay thin. The more I exercise, the more pain I get, and it doesn't go away. I think this pain is probably from my inner self or body rebelling. How do I resolve it and stop the increase of pain? It seems I can't continue to exercise as I can't tolerate any longer the level of pain. Just not being afraid of the symptoms is not working for me. So I absolutely get that. The way I'm thinking about this from a columns perspective is that this is actually power column work that I want to do. There's something in your relationship with yourself that isn't feeling good enough. Where is this pressure coming from is a question that I would ask. And I don't say that critically. We all have pressures that we have on ourselves, but typically speaking, what I find is the reason there's so much therapy going on and so much search for how to get answers is that we don't have the best relationship with ourselves. And what I do when I look for these things is I ask why. I drill down. Why the pressure? So let's say you were in my group, Soaring High, I'd ask you, all right, well, what's the pressure about? And you'd give me an initial answer. And I don't mean this as an insult at all. I mean it as good news. Your first answer would not be the answer. It would just be the first answer. Well, here's what's occurring to me about the pressure. Okay, well, why that? Why do you feel that way? And I'm not trying to pick anybody apart in this. I'm trying to get answers, to dig down deep. And as we drill down, we would eventually get to something along these lines. I'm making this up. This probably doesn't apply to you. But for some people, they could say, well, I'm feeling all that pressure because I feel I'm not good enough. Why do you feel you're not good enough? Because I got messages that I wasn't good enough. And what do you actually think? I think I'm actually not good enough. Why are you not good enough? Because I have thoughts that I don't feel good about. I'm not actually a good person in my own mind. Oh, wow. Okay. How did you get to that? Because I didn't get the love that I needed. What does that mean to you? Because that means that I'm not lovable. Oh my God. Now we've gotten really deep. Now, that was all a made up line of thought that could happen. Probably doesn't apply to you, but something like that does. So I would want to look at what's beneath that, because otherwise you're in this cycle with yourself about exercise and whether you can do it and whether you're allowed to do it. The columns allow us to get really, really deep in understanding ourselves. There's 3 different ways to do it, and we can look at it. So I hope that was helpful. I want to look at that more with you. Happy to work with you in my group or come back here for the Q&A. I'm going to do a quick couple of questions, then we're going to wrap up for today. I also want to note next week's Q&A. I am going to do it, but I have to do a short version, unfortunately. There's a meeting that I'm running for another board I'm on, actually, for some teachers. and I'm going to need to leave about at the half-hour mark. So we're just going to do a quick half an hour session next week. I probably won't even do much preamble. I'll just jump in with questions if they're there. Okay. Let me see if I can get to some questions to wrap up here. Beatrice, good to see you here. It's really strange. I was just on a group a few hours ago that was really helpful, but I fell asleep and I woke up with severe back pain, which I don't usually have. Okay, so, okay, that was actually a second entry of that. So Beatrice, here's what I'd be thinking. Anytime you have symptoms after a dream, that's emotions column. It's an onset or an uptick. It happens for emotional reasons. When we're dreaming, we're thinking a lot about emotional experience. So don't doubt this. Trust your body. It is not the bed. It's nothing else at all. Okay. Marley, I see you. You said thank you all, and I realized you said something before. Or you're just saying hi. Okay. Well, good to see you. If you do have questions, do let me know. But it is not the bed. It's not anything else. This is emotional. And in fact, when you guys discover that the emotions column really works, that emotions do lead to symptoms, your doubt will come plummeting down. And that's the whole game there. We want to get doubt down. All right. So we would look at that together. All right. Shelby says, definitely feel the not good enough, not lovable. I was a mistake child, AKA not planned. Ooh, so that hurts. Nobody should have ever told you that. Even if it was true, hopefully they really loved you anyway. And if they didn't make you feel loved, that needs to be remedied. We'll work at that, Shelby. That's some power column stuff that will feed your doubt coming down. Everything makes sense. You make sense and your symptoms make sense. I'm going to show you guys that again and again and again. Okay, 2 last questions. Lori says, hi, Dan. I was able to get up this morning and take a walk around the corner without taking an Ativan first. A win. Just wanted to share. Beautiful, Lori. Love it. We're getting wins all the time. And in the group, it's one of the greatest things about group is I've started implementing share wins. So at least one time a session, we go through all these wins. And by the end of it, people are pretty jazzed. They're like, oh, wow, a lot can happen here. The columns work, guys, and I want to show you that. All right. Okay. Marley says, oh my gosh, Shelby, I was told the same and they decided to keep me. Okay. I'm glad they kept you, but do we feel loved? We need to feel loved. We got to have a good relationship with ourselves. 2 more questions before we wrap up. Solitary Daughter says, I struggle with fear/doubt. My 10 plus years of constipation has seemingly led into adjacent issues like nutrient deficiencies and things along those lines. Can TMS lead to structural issues that can help or can't be helped? I don't know which one you meant, but I'm going to go ahead and tell you this anyway. It can help with all kinds of things, including constipation. It also can help with, here's the thing. The body is very resilient. You're not going to have a lot of trouble from this that's lasting. We can change all of this. When we address the columns, 3 things happen. Your doubt comes down, and that makes your thinking better. Your emotions get understood. That awareness makes you understand yourself better and be able to manage acute symptoms better. By the way, when doubt comes down, then nothing seemingly chronic lasts. And then thirdly, when you align with yourself, your body can feel how good that feels, and everything starts to go back to normal. And when I say back to normal, I mean that could be all the way back to your birth, where maybe you were never in a state that was totally normal, but your body will feel when everything's fine. Okay, Susan, you said this. Dan, you said dry eyes is TMS, so burning from dry eyes is also TMS. Yes, absolutely. That shows you how doubt works. It tries to find one way in. Well, okay, dry eyes is the burning from the dry eyes. Yep. Almost all of these things are going to be mind-body. And when I say almost all, I mean like a huge amount, 99.9999999%. Okay? Anything that isn't, doctors are going to catch you. Solitary Daughter says, thank you. You are welcome. Okay, Nicole Weiss, last question. My husband had a fusion at the L3, L4, L34, L45, and he doubts his TMS recovery because of his surgery. Can he still fully recover from TMS after a surgery? Absolutely. I've done it with many, many people. Sometimes it can pose some extra doubt. I see your question. Can you still recover from TMS after spinal fusion? Yes, you absolutely can. A surgery is not going to stand in your way at all. There's, other than, did it cause doubt? But guess what? That's what I'm here for. If you have doubt, I'm here to crush it. I'm here to walk you through it. We can observe, articulate, and counter until until he or whoever recognizes this was mind body all along. Even if you feel you didn't need the surgery, or if you did need the surgery but you got better from it or should be getting better from it, there are answers always. Can you recover from symptoms? Pretty much no matter what. The only way you can't recover from a symptom is if something catastrophic happens physically or medically. And even then, a lot of work can be done, including mind body work. So I'll leave it at that, Nicole, but we can get into more specifics about how we could get him better or anybody else in that situation. Okay. All right, guys, it has been a pleasure. We're way over time at the moment, but I just wanted to make sure to get those questions in, especially because next week's going to be a short version of this. Remember, only a half an hour. So we're going to come in and we're going to hit questions right away. All right. So let's keep the questions coming, guys. That's the key. You've got to ask your questions and you've got to get them answered to your satisfaction. I've done my best to do that in these initial rounds, but follow up. Keep asking the questions. All right. It is a pleasure seeing you all. I will see you briefly next week, and then we'll just keep right on rolling. If you need my help, though, come to groups. On top of the groups and the times that we meet, I have a place where you can put your written questions, and I answer them usually within 24 hours. So you can keep getting your answers there in a much more efficient and consistent way. All right. But great to see you all here. Keep the questions coming. I'll keep answering them.